I like legit heard that slurp.
I know. It's so bad.
It's a delicious coffee.
We're doing ASMR now.
Yeah.
All right. So, welcome to another episode, or the second episode of the Escaping 350 podcast. Today, I'm recording with my brothers. So, those of you who grew up with us, you probably recognize us right away. But I've alluded to them in many of my previous content and, of course, in my interview with Responsible Faith. So, to put some faces to the individuals I'm referencing, this is my youngest brother, Adam, and my older brother, Anthony. And I can definitely say that I wouldn't have some of the insights I have today without having my brothers to bounce ideas off of. We kind of just shared questions with each other. So this was a lifelong process, I would say, right? That I guess people tend to see us leave the church, and to them that it felt like overnight. But in reality, these were things we were questioning for a long time. You guys agree?
100%.
Yep.
Just started noticing a lot of things towards the end that I was kind of questioning myself. And then obviously they put you in that mindset of you have to shoo those thoughts away. And it was just a lot of fighting with yourself and figuring out am I going crazy or am I actually feeling this way?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's how brainwashing works. And I think, it sounds a little extreme, but I think it's the most accurate way of describing what we went through. Because I think all of us could raise our hands and say that we were fully invested.
Yeah.
Right? I was going to say drink the Kool-Aid, but I guess maybe that, I mean, I know that I did.
Yeah, 100%. I felt the same way.
I was a hardcore believer,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's what makes me so frustrated is people who did know us,
Mm-hmm.
they knew that how invested we were. We were involved in as many ministries as we could be involved in. We were contributing creative ideas. And then as far as what we knew, we were doing much more in-depth study than a lot of our peers. And I know people will hear that and think, okay, well, you guys are very arrogant. I'm like, no, legitimately, I know.
Yeah, I was like, this is so important. That's why we poured our heart into it. We wanted to make a difference.
It was 100% just trying to save souls, legitimately. And
yeah.
if I were there still, I feel like I'd be a little more involved than I was. I wasn't as much involved as you guys were. You guys were 100% dedicated to everything you guys did. But 100%, if I was still there, I'd probably be a little more dedicated. But
yeah. I always thought, I was it's such a shame because we're trying to make a huge difference, and it's we always got fought back at but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I remember we were pretty invested in college and career ministry. And I know that was a big turning point for probably you mostly, but for me as well, because I was involved at the same time you were. And there was a lot of pushback for things that we wanted to do. And I know for a fact that we were sincere and genuine
mm-hmm.
in the things that we wanted to do for the purpose of reaching souls. It wasn't self-interest that was motivating us.
Yeah, because what we were doing was in the back, behind the scenes. We were not trying to be this is for our own, glory, they would say. And I just think it was just things just started not adding up. One of the things that broke my heart, one of the most, is when me and Xavier, we wanted to. It was mostly Xavier's idea. He's we need to be the hands and feet of God, and we need to be the ones reaching out and helping people. And we were trying to do something, and then it kind of just really it was me feeling bad for Xav, because it was they took it away from him almost, and they started doing something totally different from what we wanted to do, taking food to homeless and things like that.
a lot of outreach.
But it's it didn't fit their specifications of how this should be, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I remember, and people who still follow the church we came from, this is rhetoric that they'll use to this day, where they suggest that, well, I don't see in the Bible where people did outreach or where they did charitable work. And I'm like, there's literally the scripture where the disciples were questioned, like, when did we not clothe you, Jesus? When did we not feed you?
Mm-hmm.
When Jesus presented that scenario to them. And it's like, you're literally dismissing one of the most important qualities of being Christ-like.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you present that as like your mission with all sincerity, it takes you aback when people reject it and say, no, we're going to pursue something else. I would love to have Xavier on the podcast at some point. You know, we've talked, and he could probably share more on that, insights on kind of what happened there. But it's just such a shame that when you're, you know, so out of focus of reaching people,
Right.
and more focused on like building your own like mini empire, you know, your ministry, you dismiss things like that I think makes you a well-rounded Christian. So
Yeah, 100%.
that's a lot of our experience. And to give context to all three of us, so of course me and Anthony are a lot older than Adam, so we had more opportunity to be involved in ministry. But I know you were pretty involved in youth group.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And did you notice anything as, I guess you were, before we phased out of going to First Church? What was that like? I mean, did you feel like you were still dedicated up until the last minute, or did you have questions?
I think I was 100% still dedicated up until the last point. I really wanted to pour everything I had into that ministry, even though I wasn't really like a main like facet of the team. I was just a student, but I wanted all my peers around me to be able to. I just wanted to see them succeed, see them grow in their own personal relationship. I just wanted to be somebody that some of these other students could, I guess, somebody that they can talk to.
Yeah.
Not so much look up to, because I don't see myself as highly as that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to be somebody that was there for other students to be able to, you know, like an outlet for people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then a little towards the end, I guess I felt it was a little strange, obviously, with the direction that the church was going to towards the end of us leaving. Just like kind of seeing and observing us pull away from other churches of the same faith. It was like super strange to me. It kind of felt like very putting ourselves up on a pedestal above everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like a lot of my friends that I knew from other churches. It was kind of hard, like pushing them away. And it wasn't really like that I was pushing them away. I still had contact with most of them, but it was just like, it's kind of weird pushing those other people of the same faith, or I guess of the same denomination, away from you. It was just strange.
Yeah. I remember struggling with that as well, because I was junior high youth pastor at the time, and we were being told from the top down to separate from the district, and there was no kind of context given. They kind of portrayed it as like, well, we're giving our staff a break. And so I kind of understood that in terms of like, okay, if we miss a rally here, if we miss a service there, maybe that's okay. But then it was just a total cutoff. Like, okay, well, we're just not going to go anymore. That's it.
And it was for like really arbitrary like reasoning. It was like most of the like their explanation would be like most of these churches are going away from the old ways, and they're like, it was something as minuscule as like the lights that they use.
Yeah.
And it was like, what does it matter as long as they're ministering, you know, and they're actually putting forth the effort to do outreach to other churches,
Right.
and giving an effort to like create community. But
I feel like they make choices like on little things like that, and then they change their minds about the little things again. You
100%.
know, yeah, it's like, oh well, they don't, you know, and then all of a sudden now they're using the light, you know.
Yeah.
And then
they act like they haven't been.
That's one thing that for me was the inconsistency. Like,
Right.
you know, I remember we were raised. I mean, well, yeah, you for sure, but us too. We were raised since very young. I mean, I was the only one that I think remembers when we were converted, right?
Yeah.
So because I can remember still going to Catholic church when we were still small, but barely, and then, yeah, I remember most of my life we were raised Pentecostal, but I still like remember a little bit in Japan being raised Pentecostal from very young. But I said that to say, the rules and everything that we follow, like they change from like every few years, it's like different, like it's just crazy that like you'd be going to hell if you had a TV in your living room, God forbid. But now, and then all of a sudden that's normal now. You just have a TV, and it's, and then it's the beards, and then it's like the length of your skirt, and it's like, it's nothing, they always say God's the same today, forever, and always, but but yet they're changing all the time.
He keeps shifting. Yeah. This God is like very, he can't stay consistent. He's like, you know what? All right, and I don't know, you probably remember this because I think we were still in the church before Anthony had left before us. They had lifted, remember years ago, they lifted the going to theaters and watching TVs in your home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it wasn't even, they don't even do like, it's so weird. It's not like announcements. It's more like you hear like so-and-so, like they're like a regarded minister in the church, and they've got like, have you gone to go see Transformers?
Right.
And that's like how you find out. It's not like the pastor's like, okay, everybody, you can go to see movies now at the theater.
Yeah.
It's just somebody that's someone that was highly regarded that, kind of stepped over the bounds and was like, and I honestly, I don't think it's communicated between other ministers or even through like the head, it's just kind of like they come from a different church and then they step over the bounds, and the pastor or whoever was in charge is kind of like, well, I need them. So I'm not going to tell them they're wrong.
Right. It's just whatever benefits them at the moment.
Yeah, that's how I felt about Pokemon, because remember, people were like so against Pokemon, so hardcore. They're like, that's the devil, don't you know? It means pocket monsters. But then, it didn't matter until they didn't know about it, and then all of a sudden, someone found out about Pokemon, and then they were like, throw away all your Pokemon. I still remember one of our friends like crushing up a a Game Boy and throwing the game away. And then, a few years later, people just playing Pokemon Go like nothing. Like it's like
it just disappeared like overnight. The sentiment,
everyone, everyone was playing it. Ministers, everything. Yeah.
I remember. You'll probably remember this one, Adam. It was your youth pastor, like made a big show to the church of like he was bringing his console to the church, and he was like, "I'm done with this.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm foregoing this for God." And then, like, of course you see that and you get, like, it does kind of not motivate you, but it excites the audience as a young person. You're like, man, I want to be just as dedicated. And then not even just a few, like, months later, it's, like, ubiquitous. Everyone's still playing Call of Duty. Everyone's still playing Fortnite. Like, it did nothing to curb the behavior. And it didn't even call out what was wrong with it.
What's funny about that situation is I used to play with him before that all happened. Mm-hmm. And then months later, or not, it was probably like a year or maybe a little more than a year, he got like back on.
Yeah. And it's like, you do that to make people feel guilty about it, right? But then you don't do any teaching to suggest why it's necessarily wrong.
There's no explanation,
right,
whatsoever.
And then when you come out of a movement like we did, I would say a cult like we did, you begin to have a more sober assessment of the things that you do, and you realize like, okay, this is actually legitimately super innocent.
Yeah,
in its proper context, right? Like, yes, you can become addicted to playing video games, but like, are we really addicted to playing video games? Like, I think there's a clinical definition of what that is.
Right.
So people are out here defining these parameters, but the church is just like, it jumps from like, okay, we're going to sacrifice it for God now.
Right.
But then later we'll reintroduce it and kind of pretend like that never happened.
Yeah.
For me, it's like the condemning of certain movies, and all the while the video games they're playing is a lot worse things in it.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that contradiction.
Yeah, I was like, I don't get, because, they'll be like, I remember we were like, we can't watch that movie at college and career because it's got cussing and this and that and sexual content. And then, okay, but we'll go over here and play Call of Duty while they're killing people and cussing and all this and all that. And I'm like, we just said we couldn't watch this movie because of that. And then you're over here. I'm like, what? I don't get it.
Yeah.
That's one of the oversights within Pentecost. I think that they will not talk about it. Yeah. Maybe some churches do, but I think it's just because it goes over the heads of some of the older ministers that are still leading these movements. Mm-hmm. Because like if you were to go into any video game lobby, modern gamers will know it is just completely vile. Like you will be introduced to some of the worst language you've ever heard in your life. And I remember talking to one of my friends growing up about this, and he was just like, I don't let it affect me. I have a good walk and relationship with God. And I was like, so you, in that context, you can give yourself Christian liberty to play video games. And you know this, you play video games, Adam. Those lobbies are like, I don't even know if you could put like a rating on what is said. But then you go watch a PG-13 movie and people get incensed over like, I remember this Disney movie that just recently came out, the Red Panda.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Christians just lost their mind over it. And Pentecostals especially.
What did they like? I forgot. What did they not like about that movie?
I think it's just the portrayal of like magic and then the subject matter, which is like, why not talk about that with, like kids obviously are going to experience that.
Mm.
Right.
So I won't like devolve the whole movie because that would be its own subject in itself, but like they would get incensed over that. And that's like a legitimate PG movie.
Right.
And then for themselves, they'll make the argument, well, I can watch Game of Thrones because I'm mature. I'm a good spiritual, like I don't let it affect me.
So much worse than that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like you pick and choose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's no consistency.
Yeah, and it's not just the inconsistency in the church, but just through the individuals too. And it was like ministers that you would look up to, and it's almost kind of like the saying, like never meet your
Your heroes.
And it's like all these ministers that you look up to, and then you finally get a chance to like, I guess, spend time with them and get to know them, and then you come to find out it's like, wow, you're like, you're not who you portray yourself to be on that podium.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like
it's
for me,
super
like
strange.
killing yourself trying to do your best, and you're like, man, I'm doing way better than them,
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm dying over here.
Yeah, really. And yeah, like the language they use, that's like one of the biggest inconsistencies too.
Yeah.
They like, and for me, it's just like they're just preaching fire and brimstone over the pulpit, and then they're like not living what they teach at all.
Yeah.
It's super inconsistent. It's kind of like that scripture I always forget, and I reference it all the time. But it's like be careful to point out the splinter in your neighbor's finger, and ignore the stump in your eye.
Oh, the beam, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not a judgmental person. Like I'm not like, well, you're doing this, and I never was like that. But like, when they're getting on to me for listening to Christian rap, and I never listened to any like secular music ever, and then and then you see a minister buy an Eminem CD, like when you're at Walmart, you're like, why do you have this Eminem CD?
Yeah.
And then in the same sentence, they're like, but you're listening to Christian rap, and I'm like, this is Christian.
Yeah, keyword. The one keyword you're supposed to pay attention to.
I'm like, and I still to this day, I think it's very powerful music. I mean, rap is powerful in its way, but it's Christian. It was very positive, very good music still.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I always made the argument at the time that rap had more lyrical complexity to modern, like contemporary music, and so there was a lot more content. And I remember there was a rap group that I followed pretty intensely. You guys probably remember the 116.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and Lecrae, Tripoli, all that. And they put together an album called 13 Letters.
Mm-hmm.
And I was obsessed with it. I loved it because it was literally each rap song in the album was highlighting one of the books of the 13 epistles. And so it was like a Bible study shrouded as an album. And yet people were telling me, no. It's all about Jeremy Camp. It's all about, I can't even remember
Chris
some of the...
Tomlin.
Jackie Velasquez, I don't know.
1,000 Foot Crutch.
Lauren
right.
Daigle.
I would get, and then like, I get annoyed when someone's like, have you heard of Hillsong? Or have you heard of, he's like, I found this new group called, Kirk Franklin. I'm like, you're like way behind the curve, man. Yeah.
I was really excited about Christian music, and not to like veer the conversation too far, but like I remember that rap music was kind of emerging in the Christian space at the time. And so it was really exciting to be a part of. And yet people were so dismissive of it. And it's like, it's so arbitrary, the distinctions you're making. Like because it's not a genre, you recognize the exact instruments and intonation. It doesn't line up with your culture.
Right.
It's wrong. And we don't ever analyze this more closely. And so they're just like, well, I don't recognize it, so don't listen to it.
Yeah.
And they do themselves a disservice, because now I'm sure they probably have no opinion, because rap music has steadily creeped into even the mainstream Christian music world. So like you have artists like Toby Mac that kind of bridges the gap between contemporary and rap, and people are like, yeah, I like this. It's nice and safe,
I predicted that. I was like, it's going to become so mainstream. It's probably going to be even in worship music, because I was like, rap is powerful, like the way, it can be so powerful the way you do it, Oh yeah, the reason why I said that is because, even before rap, there was rock, and everybody was like, you don't use drums, you don't use guitar, that's rock music. And now people just use guitars and drums in worship music like regular, and no one thinks anything about it,
Right.
So that's why I was making that prediction. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's going to become so mainstream, like just normal. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I actually heard a minister that we know, I won't mention their name, but they were very involved in music and used to attend our church. And now they're pastoring another work. And he actually said that he anticipated that the church is always 10 years behind the mainstream. And so I thought it was pretty progressive of him to suggest that like eventually the church catches up. And so that's why we shouldn't be dismissive of it. Because I was like, most people I talk to do not agree. They feel like it should never be introduced into the church. And then, of course, what happens? It does.
Right.
And so you add, like, even if it's not overtly rap, you take elements of rap, like the beat, you take the instruments and the lyricism. Like, you have some of these like contemporary artists like Lauren Daigle, like go into like a mini rap sequence in the middle of a chorus. And people are like, yeah, I'll get hyped up for that. It's like, that was borrowed from hip hop prior to her using it.
That genre that you all hate.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from.
So, well, they shoot themselves in the foot. And I'm glad you brought up the whole, the guitar thing, because that was, I think, one of our biggest arguments that we were making was that, like, while they were condemning us for listening to Lecrae, we're, quietly letting in the electric guitar, which, mimics, Jimi Hendrix, right? Yeah, Stevie Vaughan, Journey, and that's what people don't realize is like the ballads of the 80s. I guess you would call them rock ballads, like
right?
Journey, Def Leppard, Pink Floyd, all that stuff that influenced early 90s and 2000s worship music.
Oh yeah,
that's where it comes from. So you would have condemned it back then, and now you just quietly accept it. So it's contradictory, and it just dismisses the whole importance of like why we're even at church to begin with.
Right.
And it's one of the things that kind of made me like realize, are you really hearing from God? Because it sounds like you just, everything that makes you uncomfortable is everything that you condemn. It's kind of like, I remember someone telling me, because you remember I used to teach Sunday school, and I remember I made a CD for all the kids, because we were learning, the books of the Bible and things like that, and I had a bunch of songs that they could listen to kind of get it in their head, fun songs, and I would throw in a little rap song once in a while, just something, to break it up, because I know how it's like when you're just listening to the same kid songs over and over. But I remember one of the teachers telling me, oh, I kind of get it. They're like, this is not appropriate for kids, but I'm like, it's clean Christian music, Yeah. But I think because it makes them feel uncomfortable, that they're like, this isn't appropriate for children. And now that I think about it, it's kind of like parallels to when people are like, we don't want to see homosexuals in public. It's not, this isn't appropriate for children. I'm like,
right.
There's no difference with like me holding a guy's hand or giving him a kiss on the lips than when you see other straight couples doing it. I'm like, because you're uncomfortable, it doesn't mean it's not appropriate for children.
Right.
Like you're just uncomfortable because you're not familiar with it, I guess.
Right. And it's just such a rush to kind of let's close the holes that allow this to become visible, as if that solves the underlying problem, right? And it's like the underlying problem, and I think this is the biggest issue, is they don't even really understand why it bothers them so much. I think it's like you said, it makes them uncomfortable, but it comes from a place of like they'll stand on saying it's my righteous indignation because it goes against the Bible. But what they're really communicating is they just personally don't like it. They personally are disgusted by it, and that stems from a place of hatred.
They're doing the same picking and choosing that they do, and it's like they wouldn't treat somebody on the side of the street like a homeless person the same way that they would somebody that's homosexual. It would be, I mean, I'm almost certain that it would be two completely different interactions.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like just a certain bias that they have towards other people. It's just not the same. They don't treat other situations the same. It's inconsistent.
I heard that like thing about not liking rap music is kind of almost like a coded racism almost.
Yeah.
Like they don't like it because it's like black music, but even then it's like, why don't you like it? It's just music.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. On the surface, they'll say they're outraged because it represents secular culture.
Right.
It represents, the worldly values. But in reality, they're outraged because it's shielding or disguising their racism.
Yeah.
And then the same when it comes to homosexuality, where they'll say, well, no, it's wrong. It's not in the Bible. And this. I mean, I think we all know this. Like the Bible has almost very little to say about homosexuality, if
Right.
like almost nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked. I mean, you're telling me, I've looked everywhere. I've like scoured. Tried to make sense of things. I've looked at the most prominent, conversion therapy. Looking into it and stuff, and it's just. You're like, impossible.
Yeah. And then if the Bible didn't emphasize it as much as they do, I mean, if we were just to take everything that they sermonize and put it into a book, it would eclipse what the Bible even says about it.
Right.
Yeah, there's not that much. I mean, like in what is in the Bible, it's like, have you seen the way it was interpreted? Like you can tell that the people who interpreted it obviously took a little bit of liberty to make it sound like homosexuality is wrong, And it's like, does it even say that? I don't think so. I mean, you can make all the cases you want, but there's a lot of prominent like Bible scholars that will say the Bible says nothing about homosexuality at all, actually, and yet there's more about other things in the Bible. Like don't quote me on this, but I just saw this on Facebook the other day that there's more things against being left-handed than there is homosexuality. So, and as a matter of fact, I thought that's a really interesting thing to me because being left-handed was actually against like a lot of the Christians and religious people thought that was satanic to be left-handed. So, and a lot of left-handed people will tell you they can't help it. They're just left-handed, you know?
Right.
And so like nuns would spank your hands for writing with your left hand, saying that's demonic. You should write with your right hand. I think it's the same thing like with homosexuality. Like they're like, don't like men, you know, you can't. And then you're like, I can't help it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it also showcases their, something they're internalizing themselves, right? To be so focused on someone's, like, these are things that are a person's personal, this is something they personally practice, like behind closed doors.
Right.
Right. And I wanted to be careful with that wording because I also don't want to like disclude, like, I think, you know, gay people, LGBT, like including the whole umbrella, like they are allowed, they should be allowed to just be themselves.
Right.
However that manifests.
Right.
Right. And people get all upset about that. But then what they're, again, this goes back to what we were saying earlier, they're actually defending their discomfort with that output. Mm-hmm. I don't like how you're portraying it. And now that, you know, if you follow any of the arguments that are made on this, it's shifted from suggesting it's unbiblical and that it's not Christian-like to now, well, we don't care what you do. Just do it in secret. Don't display it or be overt about it.
Right.
And it's like, why is the argument shift now? It seems like you've lost your conviction. Like
I never heard that. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people, and I know this will probably like upset a lot of my conservative followers, but so be it. A lot of people that like parrot Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh kind of types. Mm-hmm. They're trying to academically approach homosexuality because they think, well, yes, I'm religious, but I disagree with homosexuality and all these other subjects because it just doesn't make logical sense. And then they don't make logical sense with their arguments. Mm-hmm. And so in the process of doing that, they've shifted the argument from, well, the Bible says it's wrong to, well, you can do it. I don't judge you, you know, but just don't do it overtly or publicly, right? And it's like, you probably seen a lot of the memes where they're like, you know, they're openly against drag show book time reading. Mm-hmm. But then how many incidents have happened that are reported versus what has happened in the church? Mm-hmm. You know, there's so many more reports. And if we're going to use the same criteria to judge that action, we have to take that same rubric and judge the church as an institution.
One thing I don't understand is like, so people, they want to say something's wrong because they don't understand it. I'm like, there's a lot of things you don't understand. I mean, what if you didn't allow anything you didn't understand to happen? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that doesn't, you know, all the while, like you're going to try to allow everything you understand. So in your own little world, you know, you'll be okay. All the while we're over here, like we have to do what makes you comfortable, you know? Mm-hmm. I'm like, that's not a fair world, you know?
Right. Yeah.
If they were to build the utopia that they envision in their head, I don't think it would be as nice as they would imagine, right? All the things that make them uncomfortable, that they don't want to see in society, they think if we can just eliminate all that and make everyone homogenous just like us, mm-hmm. it'll be a beautiful world. And I think when you have places that look like that,
it'd be boring.
It's boring.
Yeah.
But it's also it's harmful. It doesn't eliminate the things that it says. So like when you talk about, okay, let's have the utopia of a Christian society. But then you look at the cults that actually enacted that.
Right.
You know, you have Jonestown, you have the Branch Davidians, you know, and you have even like smaller cases of that. I mean, there's so many documentaries out. It's mind blowing. Like the Duggars.
Right.
They created their own like microcosm or their own like kind of small environment where they had the Christian utopia, and yet there was rampant, you know, sexual abuse. There was people, arrogant, egotistic, narcissistic. You had people murdering each other. Like, it doesn't eliminate the underlying sins when they get what they want. And so it upsets me that you don't want a more diverse society, and you're focusing on all these little subjects when we should be focusing on the subjects that the New Testament is very clear about. And if you want to be a prominent, Bible following Christian, there's all this emphasis on the fruit of the Spirit, which have nothing to do about, like, imagine if one of the fruit of the Spirit was condemning homosexuality.
Right.
Like, and God is sovereign. He literally could have authored the scriptures to make it that clear.
Right.
And that's what frustrates me, is it's more clear to be compassionate, to be long suffering, to show mercy, to be generous. And they will toss all those traits in the trash to maintain their prejudice and hate, bigoted views.
Right.
So sorry, I got really passionate about that.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
It really frustrates me.
It also would eliminate, not eliminate, but really stagnate progress, because if everyone's the same and you're just, only allowed to do so many things, and you're not allowed to be creative, and you're not allowed to, it's going to really stagnate progress,
Yeah.